Welcome to Codex History of Video Games. My name's Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta, still jamming out.
Still jamming out because the music's still playing. And you know what is also still playing and never stops? Dungeons and Dragons. People have been playing that for 40 years, 50 years, 100 years?
No, it'll be 100 years in 2070 something, though.
Some say
if we're
of years.
alive in 2070, that means we get to see 100 years of Dungeons and Dragons. It's kind of cool.
Wow.
Maybe I'll be a robot by then.
Hopefully.
I don't mean to get
robots by then.
I don't mean to get philosophical up top. This is a very fun episode, though. I'm excited to talk about this because I got really into this. I got like really, really into this. Usually we play a game for the podcast and we get pretty into it, obviously. Like we try, but this game, it's got some special near and dear stuff to my heart. Let's just get into it. So Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. Like I said in the previous episode, we're going to do D&D as like these little one shots, of like just the individual D&D games that came out. And we're going to start with Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. One, because it was really easy and accessible for me to get into because it was just a game on Xbox that I actually, in PlayStation 2, it originally came out on PlayStation 2. And I had this game on PlayStation 2 as a kid and I played it, not even realizing it was Dungeons and Dragons. Like wow. I had no idea as a kid because I didn't play Dungeons and Dragons as a kid. I started as like a 29-year-old adult person. So, but I was always curious about it. Like I had people in high school playing D&D and I always wanted to get invited, but I was too afraid to ask. Did you hear that? Where you're like, yeah, so cool, which is probably funny because in their mind, they're like, we're playing Dungeons and Dragons. We're not that cool. But in my mind, I'm like, they're so cool. They play D&D. I can't ask them to play because I get too scared. But yeah, shout out to Austin. Okay, he knows. He doesn't listen to this. All right, so now we're gonna get into this today. We're doing Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, not the CRPGs Baldur's Gate, which we will do eventually.
It's a spin-off of the spin-off.
It's a spin-off of these CRPG games that were really popular. And so we'll get into why that is, like why it's a spin-off, and when we get to the development section. But I got really into this, so that we got a lot to talk about. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, let's do the grime facts real quick. It was developed by Snowblind Studios and published by Black Isle Studios and Interplay Entertainment. Fun fact, Black Isle Studios published the CRPG Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 games and all of their expansions as well. So that's how close we are to this.
So they're deep in the Baldur's Gate lore.
Yes, deep in the Baldur's Gate lore. So it was originally released for PlayStation 2 in November of 2001. And then it came out and ported to Xbox on GameCube and Xbox and GameCube on October 22nd, 2002 and November 20th, 2002, respectively. So that's when it came out there. There is a Game Boy Advance version that released in 2004, which has some differences we're going to get into a little bit at the end, because I did try that out too, just to kind of get an idea for it. There's a 4K re-release on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch in May 2021, and a PC re-release in December 2021. We're going to talk about that in a second because I have some gripes with that. Okay. So PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, Game Boy Advance, and then all the modern consoles, including PC, are like where it all released on, like we just mentioned. But recommended ways to play, I would say, if you can play this on PlayStation 2 or Xbox. I played it on Xbox. And the reason I'm not recommending the modern versions of these games is because they're $30.
That's too many dollars.
That's too many dollars for games that came out in 2001. And all they did was like bump up the resolution.
How much are they if you wanted to buy some, like a PlayStation 2 disc?
$15.
Okay, half price. Boom.
Yeah. So like I would say definitely get this game. If either you get it, if you can get the PC game version of on sale, great. Like, but the problem is because it's Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 3 was so successful, these games never go on sale. Okay. They're never cheap. It's a bummer. It's a huge bummer because they know they can charge for them. But the worst part is, and Tyler and I talked about this off camera, off show, is they made them $30 and they didn't even add an online co-op option, which is what these games desperately need, is they need an online co-op option. Like that's what they should have done.
That would have maybe made it worth it. Then you could have said, this is clearly better than the PlayStation 2 version because I can play online.
Exactly. I would even say take Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 1 and 2, redo them, mash them together, put online co-op in them, and then sell them for $40 as a package. That would be the way to do it. But $30 for a game that they've done nothing to except bump the resolution, in my opinion, is way too much money. That's
$30 each.
Yes, $30.
We're only gonna talk about the first one, right?
Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 1 and $40 for Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2. Meanwhile, the Baldur's Gate CRPGs go on sale all the time for like $2.
Yeah.
I don't know why these ones are so expensive. I don't get it. So maybe it's like they're playing off of your nostalgia because they're so niche. Anyway, that was me getting on my soapbox about game pricing in 2025.
I would bet that a lot of that comes down to there's nobody who actually cares enough to even think about putting it on sale. Like somebody has to make the decision to put it on sale, and there's probably nobody who cares. Like there's nobody in charge of thinking about how much Dark Alliance costs.
It's probably just sitting on some person's like Excel spreadsheet of like game sales and when the sales schedule, and it's just sitting there at the bottom of the spreadsheet. No one's paying attention to it. They never use XLOOKUP to find it. They don't even care.
Nope.
Oh, poor neglected Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 1 and 2. We'll talk about 2 next time we do Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance games or D&D games, but we're only talking about 1 today. So number of copies sold, over 1 million units across all the original platforms, which is pretty good. Pretty good. Okay. The genre or gameplay style, it's an ARPG. You could also use the term hack and slash because just the noises.
That was big at the time, like that genre of just hack and slash, sort of varying levels of Diablo.
Yeah, it is varying levels of Diablo. That's a very good way to put it. So the average time to complete is 10 to 12 hours for the main story. Now, I beat the game in about 10 hours. I would say there's at least an hour of, oh no, this is an old game, lost save time. In that
okay, gotcha.
Where I played and lost time by just goofing around and not hitting the save points, which made me realize a thing I missed in the gameplay thing, talking about the save system in this game, because it's enough to drive me bonkers.
Is it like you die, you go back to wherever you saved last?
Okay. And there's a lot of little book pedestals, and you got to go back, track to them to get it, and it's frustrating. So we'll talk about this stuff though in the end. I've kind of organized this with, I have some thoughts on gameplay in the middle that are like personal, but my thoughts on the game are at the very end after like the legacy section. So the Metacritic score is an 87 out of 100 for the PS2 version. The PS2 version is kind of the crown jewel way to play. The Xbox version is very similar though. Like they're not that different. I just think it was known to a lot of people probably as a PlayStation 2 game more than an Xbox or a GameCube game. I played it on PS2. I think it was a greatest hits title too. So there's
a million copies. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
I forget what the threshold is to be greatest hits, but I think it's under 1 million. So.
Oh, okay. There you go. So, all right, let's talk about the gameplay. So, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, an action role-playing game, hack and slash combat. I would say it's very similar to Diablo, but you choose from 3 distinct characters and their classes. So there's a human arcane archer, an elven sorceress, or a dwarven fighter. And each offer their own unique abilities and play styles. And you also unlock a secret 4th character after beating the game. So the playable characters are Vaughn, who's a human arcane archer, Adriana, who's an elf sorceress, Cromlech, who is a dwarven fighter, and then the famous, the one and only, and this is how I've always said it. I've always pronounced it as Drist Doerden. I don't know if that's right. I could just be going wrong. I'm kind of freestyling it. I've read the books. This is how I read it. They're the famous Drow Ranger. They're a bonus character. Do you know Driz
Drow Ranger from Dota?
From Dota? Yeah, it's probably honestly, that might be based on Drist Stewart. And
probably is. I almost
because like Drist is like one of the most famous D&D characters because of these R.A. Salvatore books that were written that are really good. If you get a chance to read them, I'm reading them right now. Thoroughly enjoy it.
Okay.
I'm on.
What's Drow Ranger in Dota?
Yeah. Well, no, he's a Drow Ranger.
Oh, Drow Ranger. Yeah. Okay,
he's a Drow Ranger. Yeah, he's a Ranger. So he learns to become a Ranger after he leaves the Underdark and his Drow heritage. We're gonna get into it. So we'll both not get into him yet, but I'm sure. Well, Driss is in the less popular Dark Alliance game, but there's a lot to talk about with this. We could talk. We're gonna go on some tangents. Just push the button now. This is the button. Okay. That's just an all-encompassing tangent button for this whole episode. It's gonna be a lot.
The whole episode's a tangent.
It is. So the dwarf fighter named Cromlech, which is hilarious because I've played as Cromlech in my playthrough and I could not remember his name to save my life because it never comes up. So it's got some like everyone's got their own powers, right? And his I used the most was a whirlwind attack where you get a double axe and you do a little spin move and you can knock out multiple characters. That's cool. I did that a lot. There's also a bull rush attack, and then there's another attack where you slam your warhammer against the ground. Didn't even unlock it because I didn't use warhammers. So take that, Dungeons and Dragons. The archer has magic infused arrows, which makes a lot of sense because here's the first tangent. Rangers in D&D are kind of boring. Like they don't really do a lot. This is a topic that people get into. And what they did is they took this arcane archer and they gave him like magic powers that essentially gave him like elemental arrows, which is good. And, like I like what they did with the archer in this game because if it was just a straight up like ranger or archer from D&D, you're kind of boring, if you ask me. My first character in Dungeons and Dragons was a ranger. Okay, his name.
I'm currently playing a ranger.
You are, see, but
no,
that's why.
A rogue. Just kidding, not a ranger.
No, you played a rogue, yeah, but that's also why our rogues are cool because they can sneak attack.
Yeah,
but that's why our sweet DM, shout out to Aaron, gave you some cool magic stuff.
Yeah, I do have some cool magic stuff. Yeah,
sorry,
I'm not a ranger. I'm a rogue, but I do use bows and arrows often. Yeah. So sometimes I get confused because I'm not good at D&D.
You're good at D&D, dude.
Thanks.
You're fighting the devils right now, and you're sneak attacking them.
That's true. I did get good.
I missed all my sword strikes, and I'm a barbarian. I
missed 2 out of my 3 sneak attacks yesterday.
Dude, the Roll20 D&D dice roller, like I'm upset. I'm mad at it. Okay, I'm not happy with it. I'm upset. Okay, let's move on. Like I said, tangents. Here we go. Okay, and finally, there's the sorceress, and the sorceress is pretty neat because the sorcerer essentially has just D&D spells. We're talking burning hands, we're talking magic missiles, and the all popular fireball. Okay, so I would say if you played this game, I wish I was a sorcerer first. I should have picked the sorcerer. I picked the dwarven fighter because I heard in like a game FAQ guide that it was easiest. Like I definitely read some old ASCII guides before I started playing, which was cool. Like just browse through them. But the sorcerer is definitely the more fun. I jumped on a sorcerer after I beat the game just to try it out. And I'm like, oh, this is way cooler, like way more fun. Like you just shoot fire everywhere. It's awesome. So I would say play as the sorcerer if you're like looking for the most fun time. Then Drizzt is special in that Drizzt is unlocked in what's called gauntlet mode after you beat the game. And his powers are kind of locked in for you. You don't level him up. And his items are kind of locked in and you don't level them up. Like he has his famous scimitars that he uses. So it's pretty cool. But Drizzt is not really a character that you use to like customize anything. But I would say the character customization in this game is pretty good. You can try out different things. And the hard part is it's an old game, so it doesn't let you respec. So you're kind of locked in. So we'll talk about it in my playthrough. I got kind of stuck and I did something, but we'll talk about that later. So characters can be carried over between games and saves. So you can import them in between different games. So if you beat the game on easy, then you can then import your character and play them on normal. And you can actually do this and exploit the game, which is how I helped myself later on. So we'll talk about that in a bit. You pick a ton of items off the ground, and the items are based on D&D. So magic item could be something anywhere from like a short sword +1 to like an adamantine great axe of fire +5. Like that's kind of how they level it out. And then the items feel very Diablo in nature in that there's that fun moment where magic items are kind of glowing blue and they just pop up and you're like, what is it? Like you get that like, oh, what is this moment where you're like excited about what it's going to be. So I like that too. Armor is universal except for class differences. For example, the sorcerer can't wear plate armor, but the fighter can. So that it's pretty standard armor. One unique thing I will say about this game is that I really liked how they did gold. Like gold is actually worth spending, which is something I could say in a lot of RPG games is not the case. Like the items you buy in the shop are actually good. Like they're worth buying, like the magic items, like they actually help you out a lot, especially early on. And then you're always buying potions. You're just the potions are mapped to the left and right trigger and you're just spamming
Just
potions the whole
chugging
game.
potions.
Yeah. It's like, it really is like you're just walking around like just chugging potions as you're fighting stuff. Just picture that. So the puzzles, because there are puzzles in the game, and I'm going to put that in quotes here, are either find X amount of items to open a door or like repair an elevator, or really unforgiving disappearing platforms that when you fall mean insta death. That's kind of what they have. But they always put little pedestals for saving right before them. So that's
Good.
nice. So they do that. They understand, because the puzzle was like you jump on a platform, then all the platforms around it start blinking except for one, and you got to jump to that one, and then the other ones disappear. But they don't give you a lot of time. It's not forgiving. It's like you have like a second to make the choice, and then it goes away. And it's actually kind of like you got to like game time focus up. Like I sat up.
You have to
I
sit
like
gamer stance in your
got
chair.
in my gamer stance, and I was like ready to go. Yeah, I was like, let's do this. So that was exactly what I looked like when I played the game, just mean mugging it. So the turrets, there's also turrets that shoot arrows and fireballs. The one thing I will say about this, I keep saying the one thing I will say when I have so much to say about it, is the turrets and the traps and the dungeons felt very D&D dungeony to me. Like they really give off that feeling of you're like an adventurer. Like, I'm dungeoneering. Here I go. I'm doing it. So it really gives you that feeling in this game, and I really, really like that a lot. I think that's kind of one of the main selling points for me is, do you want to feel like a little more like exciting, like you're going into a dungeon and wrecking stuff, then you should play this game, because in the D&D universe, especially.
Yeah, it's like D&D with faster combat.
Exactly. That's what it is. It's D&D Diablo is what this game is.
You sold me.
The game is organized into 3 acts, each with their own social hub area. First, you have Baldur's Gate, where you go to the Elf Song Tavern. That's where you're at. Then there's a dwarven settlement in the Sunset Mountains, which includes a jaunt into the what they call Drow Underground, but really it's the Underdark is where you're going. Does not look nearly as cool as the Underdark in Baldur's Gate 3. Don't get your hopes up. It's just another dungeon, but still, it's great. The final place you go is the Marshes of Chairlimber. One thing I do find impressive is this game is actually fully voice acted too, which
was getting more common in those days, but
like,
still not like
2001, and it's fully voice acted. Every character has a voice, even yours. Like when you try to do a move, and they're like you're like, I'm exhausted, is what the dwarf says when he tries to. He's like, I can't. I'm exhausted. It's good. So there's also, this is kind of a funny thing in the game, side quests. In the first act, there are side quests.
Side quests, also known as
that's true.
But in-game tangents.
That's correct. Then so for the first 2 side quests in the game, you have to find an amulet for someone, and then there's also a missing person. And these give you like a pretty formidable amount of bonus experience and gold. Now, I find this funny because these are the only 2 side quests in the whole game.
Wow.
I went into the other acts looking for side quests, and I could not find them.
Damn.
And then I consulted the GameFAQs guide, could not find anything about other side quests in them either. So it's just like, I think they do these 2 in the beginning. My theory is to make the leveling process go a little faster, because leveling is slow in this game. It is truly a grind. Like later on, you'll pop levels a lot quicker because you're doing more fighting more formidable enemies that drop more XP. But especially those first 5 levels, it's going to feel really slow. So just keep that in mind. That's normal. So do the side quests if you get a chance. You have a health bar in the red up top, a blue mana bar at the bottom, and then in the middle is your green XP bar. And you'll just notice how long it takes to fill. You can replenish in health and mana with potions, as I said before, you buy them, and you're going to do that constantly. You're just going to be constantly hitting the triggers to do that. It kind of feels very rhythm gamey because you're like fighting, but you're also like making sure you hit the triggers based on the bars on the top left. Like you're like doing that. So
okay.
Once you beat the game, you unlock the gauntlet, where you have to clear 7 rooms in a dungeon in 15 minutes. And I tried it, and it's really hard. Like even as Dritz, who's like got really good stuff, it definitely seems like something you need to practice. and I got time for that, so I didn't do it. I was like, I'm good.
Can you
I think I'm
co-op
done.
it?
You might be able to co-op the gauntlet, yeah. But it does one thing about the gauntlet is once you beat it, you unlock extreme difficulty. So that's kind of
Ooh.
why you want to do it. But now that I've mentioned that, it's time to talk about my thoughts on the gameplay. Like these are just some opinions on the gameplay. There are 3 difficulty levels: easy, medium, and hard, and you unlock extreme after beating the gauntlet. As I said, I started on normal, and that was a mistake. You should not start this game on normal.
Hmm.
I would start it on easy. I was dying to rats in the first area because if
Dang.
you get mobbed by enemies in this game, you die very quickly. The game, I don't know if this was intentional, and this is kind of one of my gripes about it. You have to like kite enemies into other rooms. So you open a door, go into the room, cue the aggro, come back into the other room, and then start fighting them one by one. Because if you don't do that, you're just going to die unless I did this wrong. But I also felt like I built my character wrong too. So the reason I was spending so much money in shops is I was buying potions constantly. Like I said, the potions are on the trigger buttons. And so you're just going to be mashing the triggers the whole time. The game was so difficult in the beginning, and I thought I had screwed up how my character worked, that I actually used this duplication exploit with importing and exporting.
Cheating.
Mm-hmm. But this is not even a cheat. This is just like in the game. So I'm going to say it's cheese, which I think we can respect some cheese, right?
Mhm,
As a
mhm.
group, do we all love cheese here? You should.
Sure do.
It's delicious. So it's the way you do the item duplication glitch is you import your character from the same save you just did after you drop items on the ground, and those items will still be there. So you can essentially duplicate items, and you can
Oh.
duplicate items and then sell them because the store, does not have a limit to how much gold they can give you. It's unlimited.
Oh, not a realistic economy simulator.
Not a realistic economy scenario. It's not like, when you play Skyrim and it says seller gold, they don't have that. It's just unlimited. So what I did is I duplicated enough items to get the best weapon that you could purchase in the first act to help carry me through. Now, I did end up getting a weapon naturally that was better than the shops, but that didn't happen until the very end of the game. So,
Dang.
yeah. So this is the other complaint, and I think we talked about this last week when you were mentioning we talked about last week. We talked about
God of War.
God of War. That's right. So when we talked about God of War, you mentioned how like there's some weird pathing things, right? Didn't you mention that? Or maybe we were talking about old games in general where the pathing has like no end. Oh no, it was a game that you're playing right now, but not God of War, right? This came up last week. Regardless,
Okay.
this is the thing. Everyone, if you haven't figured it out by now, Tyler and I don't remember anything we talk about on this podcast. There's just nothing. It's just nothing up here.
It's a fugue
The minute
state. We just
the
go
minute
in.
we turn
yeah.
off the recording, it's just gone. It's just out, and that's just the way it is. And we're sorry, but we mentioned it last week, so I wanted to bring the point up here. The frustrating part about the map design in Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance is the map has these branching paths, and you think the branching paths are going to be a part of like a side area.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Or
God of War
chest.
is like that, where you think it's going somewhere, and then
But
there's
there's
like
nothing.
not really anything
It just
there.
dead ends. It just ends, and there's nothing there. And you're
Usually
just
there's
like,
a chest in God of War of like
there was
XP or
sometimes there
something.
was not chests.
Wow.
Sometimes it was just a gelatinous cube, and I killed it, but nothing else. So, although it was cool to see a gelatinous cube in a video game, love that. So, yeah, I mean, this is kind of a classic game design thing. So I don't even know if I'd want to call that like a bad thing or not. It's just something that I noticed where I was like, again, really nothing, but that's just the way it is.
I mean, if it wasn't fun, then it was bad, right?
I guess you're right. You're right. We should be more critical of video games, you and I. But I just enjoy them so much. I can't get mad at them. I love them. That's why we do this.
Me too. Well, and I wouldn't suggest that the whole game as a whole is bad, but if you go somewhere down a side thing, then it's not satisfying. Then does the developer want me to go down these side paths? If they do, they should make them interesting. If they don't want me to go down them, why did they put them in the first place?
That's a good point. That was the more eloquent version of the point I was trying to make just now. That's good, Ty. That's good. All right. We're going to do more final thoughts at the end, but let me talk about the plot real quick. This is probably the longest plot section I have ever written.
I can't wait.
Just so we know, we're going to do this new segment called Mike tries to explain the plot from memory of a game that he's played. And this is me just straight up. I just trauma dumped the entire plot.
All right, let's go.
Describe it. So if your spoilers for a game that came out in 2001, everybody, here we go. The game starts with a narrator, like DM, announcing your arrival to Baldur's Gate. Then you are immediately knocked out and robbed of all your possessions.
Classic RPG trope.
Oh, it's beautiful, the RPG tropes. Then there's like a cutscene where the thieves are gonna kill you, but then the city watch shows up and stops them, and it's the only time I can think of where the guards in D&D actually did something productive and helpful. It's the only time. And it's them preventing you from getting murdered. So good for them. They tell you, like, I remember I played, hit the tangent button again. I started a D&D campaign with some people. I forget which one it was. I think it's the one where it's like you end up going to Infernus eventually. It's like, Descent into Avernus, I think is what it's called. And the City Watch is just constantly corrupt. It's just you join the City Watch like you're drafted into it involuntarily, and they're just so corrupt and horrible. And I'm like, that's why it was so different to me. It's like, oh, we got the two honest cops working Baldur's Gate beat. You know what I mean? It's kind of nice. So yeah, I just wanted to hit that out there. Just let him know. The cops in Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance seem to be honest, which is good. So they actually take you to a tavern because they're like, it's dangerous out here. You know, go ahead and go to this tavern. And apparently this is where your character just vows revenge to get their stuff back. That's the crazy part, is like, if I got robbed, I would be like, oh man, I cut my losses and I'm just going to try to like leave. Right. But apparently you get robbed and you're like, no, vengeance.
Well, hey, that's why they never made a video game out of your revenge story, I guess.
That's true. I mean, yet. Who knows? Maybe my revenge plot will happen when I'm like 60 or 70. Isn't that what that movie Gran Torino's about? I don't know.
That one, Thelma also. If you haven't seen Thelma, it's like she's like 90 and she goes like the 90-year-old version of John Wick. It's great. It is a wonderful movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
extremely realistic as well. And I don't say that sarcastically. I mean, like, she's 90 and acts like it.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, I'm gonna hit my Thelma arc when I turn 90. So everyone get ready for that. Okay. So they then tell you to go to a tavern. That's where we're at right now. And then you vow to destroy them because you're a hero and heroes destroy evil things' plans. Like, that's the whole point of being a hero in Dungeons and Dragons, is you just thwart evil, right? So the elf lady that runs the inn, also, this is a TV clean podcast. This is the era of physics being used for specific body parts in video games. I'm just going to tell you that right now. So that's something I want to mention because it is a part of video game history. If you are familiar with Dead or Alive beach volleyball, you know what I'm talking about. But that's all we're going to mention right now. Okay.
I think that bartender is also voiced by Jennifer Hale, because I played like 15 minutes of this game last weekend, and I'm pretty sure it's Jennifer Hale that does the voice of that bartender.
It honestly baffles me that these developers were so focused on adding these physics in that uses computing power. You could have used that for something else, like for gameplay, but they're like, no, we need the physics for this in here. It makes me laugh. Okay.
Could have had better graphics the whole game, but instead
they're like, nope, we need to make things move in certain directions when people move. It's important. So, all right. One thing you notice about the Elf Song Tavern is that there is an annoying song. It's not annoying at first. It's nice at first, of a lady singing, but it gets annoying as you go back to the tavern 800 times to buy more potions, like I did. And what you learn is there's an elf lady who died waiting for her lost love. I'm telling you this now because it's actually important. Okay. It doesn't seem like it's important, but when I hit the moment in the game where it was, I was like, wow, they actually brought that back. That's crazy. So
wow.
Just to let you know, the bartender gives you a key to the basement. I think her name's Aerith, Aerth or Ayth. I don't know. I didn't write it down. I'm bad at plots, but this is off of memory. So there we go. And your first mission is she's going to give you a key to the sewers from her cellar, but you have to kill rats for her in her basement first, because this is a fantasy game and you got to kill some rats. And when I played this game as a child, I was like, this seems kind of tropey. Guess what? 11-year-old Mike was correct. It is very tropey. You do have to kill rats in the basement. So kill the rats. It's kind of like a mini tutorial. I still died because bad at video games, but it's hard too. If you get swarmed by the rats, they can really knock your health down. Like, you got to be careful. So you get the key from Ethon after you kill the rats, who explains it's dangerous down there and that he was in the old Thieves Guild, because there's a new Thieves Guild fighting the old Thieves Guild. There's like a gang war happening in Baldur's Gate. And that's what you got kind of caught up in when you got hit and bonked on the head. So he gives you the key to go to the sewers to get your vengeance, and the real fight begins, because you find out, you go through all the sewers, you fight a bugbear, and then you get to the crypts of the city. Apparently Baldur's Gate has like a Parisian style crypt, underneath the city, which is cool, right? It's a cool fantasy thing to do. And you get down there, and swarming with undead. We're talking skeletons, zombies, not normal though, because you meet a priest who tells you that there's an evil orb that is bringing the dead back to life and turning live people undead.
We can't have that.
Yeah,
we gotta get that orb.
You just walk in, you become a zombie. That's lame. No one likes that. So you got to fight that orb. The orb boss fight is funny because you fight the orb and then it floats in the air, and then you got to kill some ads, and then it comes down again. Then you got to fight it. But it's a stationary object. It's just like, feels like you're beating up a sofa. It doesn't really make sense, it's like ruining someone's living room. But it's nice. So you do that. You beat the orb, and you think the story's done, but that's not it. There's more. And in fact, this whole game I would describe as but wait, there's more. That's how they do the story of this game. Is
Billy Mays the game.
It is. So there's a hit the tangent button again, Tyler. This is there's the video going around. It's kind of popular among, like, if you're on like book TikTok or like story TikTok or D&D TikTok, of Matt Parker and Trey Stone talking about narrative and how they do narratives for their South Park episodes. And they always write them out. They say by doing like, this happens because, and this causes this to happen, right? Like, this directly because of this. They say bad stories. Bad stories are this happens and then this happens. Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance is 100% and then story. And that's fine. It works for this case, especially for a video game. Like, if I, as a kid, was I playing this caring about the story? Not really, if I'm being honest. I was just trying to beat stuff up, right? And that it's a game. And I do think the gameplay is solid there. So just keep that in mind as we tell this whole plot. So after you destroy the orb, you then get access to the Thieves Guild. You kill guys, and then you get to 2 bosses. The first boss is a man named Karn, who is the person that knocked you out in the beginning. And he wears this cool mask, and his boss fight 10 times harder than the final boss fight. And I know this because it actually took me 10 times to beat Karn, and I beat the final boss on the first try.
So, well, hey, objectively 10 times harder.
Yeah, 10 times harder. So you fight Karn, you beat him, it's cool. Meanwhile, the big boss is a beholder. Yeah,
behold,
that's right.
A beholder.
A beholder. You, a lone level 3, 4, or 5 character, depending on if you did the side quests or not, has to fight and kill adult beholder.
Wow. Do you get the beauty out of the eye of the beholder?
You don't get the beauty out of the eye of the beholder, which is lame. They did tease this, though. I didn't mention this, but you just reminded me, Tyler. In the Elf Song Tavern, there's a miniature stuffed beholder, like a small one, kind of foreshadowing this boss fight, which is cool. So good call out on that time. You know. Okay, so you actually beat him super easy first try. Just pummeled him with arrows. That's what I did, and it worked. Then you go back to the inn, and you learn the guy who gave you the sewer key, Ethon, is actually a member of a group called the Harpers. The Harpers are a famous Dungeons and Dragons faction, and I would describe them as like a non-governmental fantasy CIA. Is how I would describe them. Like, they're trying to stop, like, they want to protect the innocent. They want to keep like the balance of Baldur's Gate and Faerun. Like, they try to stop like magical plots to take over the world. Like, that's kind of their whole thing, right? Which is funny because in my first D&D campaign that I DM'd, it was like a Mind Flayer D&D campaign, and I made it kind of like Bioshocky because I didn't know what to do. So I was just like, I'm going to go to video games and just like pull things from video games. And I had my players like work with the Harpers to stop this like mind flayer invasion. This was before Baldur's Gate 3, by the way. So
Oh wow, you were ahead of your time.
take that, Larian Studios. I'm just kidding. I love Larian Studios and I love Baldur's Gate, and I also love Divinity as well. So shout out to them. So okay, this is getting kind of long, but we're still going. We're not even through the first act yet. So
Oh my goodness!
after he's dead, there's a teleportation gate, and you join the Harpers. It said you can't. He gives you the option to not join the Harpers,
What
but
if you don't?
I didn't say no.
Game ends. Credits roll.
That would be so funny.
Beat the game.
Oh my gosh! Now I want to go back and see if it works that way. I might beat the game on easy with a sorcerer and see if it does that. If it says like game's over, sorry. Like
it's probably going to end up being like, I say no, and they're like, but are you sure? And then it just asks you again.
Yeah, that'd be
no again. It's like, but are you sure?
I'm gonna find out. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna take my dwarven fighter that's beaten on normal mode, import him into an easy game, blow through everything, and then see if I can say no. Yeah. All right. So that's a really good experiment. So then you take a teleportation gate and you're at the mountains now. You're at the Sunset Mountains, and this is pretty quick. You have to fight light a signal fire for the dwarves. Then you have to fight a drow invasion in their mines, which involves you going to the Underdark to kill a drow priestess boss. And then you have to fight an ice dragon. That's right, you're fighting an ice dragon.
Ooh, this game, a cryo dragon.
Yeah, this game pretty much doesn't care about like challenge ratings in D&D, which I get because you have to like have fun, right? This game is a real example of the rule of cool with Dungeons and Dragons. I think it's cool in that sense. It's fun, and that's why I like it. So after the dragon is dead, you go to the final act. That's right. That's how much we're skipping the second act, because the second act is honestly completely pointless, if you ask me. As far as the plot goes, there is nothing in the plot of the second act that talks about the plot of the third. It is filler, is what it is, and it's fine. So you do that, and then you go to the tower. You do that, and you go into the third act. So this is the gripe for me of the story. The story is explained in the first act. The second act has nothing to do with anything. Then you get to the third act, and the lizard man that you talk to does probably, no joke, 10 minutes of exposition to explain what is going on. Dang. I sat there and just pushed the A button for like 10 minutes to be like, what is happening in this video game? And just this like, and I actually listened. I was like, okay, so there was a great flood. Like this marshland got taken over by lizard people. Then this Onyx Tower appeared, and now the lizard people are like worshiping the Onyx Tower and turning evil. And so that's like the story, right? Still have no idea how this relates to Baldur's Gate and where we started. No clue. So you then have to go to kill the leader of the lizard people to like break them and separate them. And then you like go into the tower. The tower is the final area, and it's called the Onyx Tower. And then you go work your way up this tower, which is very cool. I'll talk about that later. By the top of the tower, you find a ghost. This ghost explains the entire story of Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance to you. He explains entirely what's going on. For the last 7 hours you have been playing this game, you really don't know what's happening. And he explains to you that the lead boss in the tower is named Eldrith. That's her name. And she is Eldrith the Betrayer, and she's a warlord from Baldur's Gate, and her and the entire army of the Western Suns were murdered because they tried to take over Baldur's Gate, and she's like cursed. She came back to life again. Then this ghost tells you when he left Baldur's Gate, he never got to see his lover again, and she was a great singer, and this is when they bring up the singer again in the bar. So you haven't thought about the Elf Song Tavern for probably like 6 hours, and then they bring it up again. And I'm like, okay, I guess props for like putting that callback in there, but why didn't you put the rest of the story in there? I suppose. You also learn that the Dark Alliance is in reference to Eldrith the Betrayer bringing all these groups of enemies together. So she's the one that told all the gnolls in the mountain area to like attack the dwarves to distract them from the mines so the drow could kick over the mines. But you don't know any of this until the very end of the game, which is like, that's what's weird about this plot. And I don't think people care about this as much as I do, but it really, I'm gonna make a Substack post about this plot because it makes me so furious.
I can't wait to read it.
But I like it. I like it a lot. Don't get me wrong. I just find it so funny that they explain the entire game in the last, right before the final boss fight. This is the final boss fight. It's Elder the Betrayer. So you fight Elder the Betrayer. Her boss fight is comically easy. Like it's not hard. It is, you go up there, she throws a dagger at you, you block it, hit her a bunch of times. She goes lightning where you gotta like can't touch her and you gotta run away from her, and then you repeat the process again. That's all you do. And I actually beat her probably in 2 tries once I figured out the like rhythm of the whole thing. Not a hard boss fight. Not as easy as the Beholder, but not as hard as the honestly, I think
Not as hard as Karn.
Karn was the hardest boss fight for me in the entire game, hands down. So
Dang.
yeah. Okay, so you kill Eldrith. She actually feels remorse in the end, and she's like, I'm actually going to die this time. I'm not going to come back for vengeance like last time. So, I mean, there's kind of some redemption there, a redemption arc a little bit.
Sure.
But then after you kill her, the Onyx Tower collapses. You go into a teleporter, and then we cut back to the lizard man who we talked to the whole time that helped us. His name is Slayvas, Sleyvas. And he is talking to someone. And he goes, Master, this was all part of the plan. Yada, 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 yada. Da, 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 da. And so we learned that that wasn't really the big bad evil guy. There's another big bad evil guy. And we were just there to get Eldrith the Betrayer out of the way. And then the DM voice comes back. You know, that voice from the very beginning that we kind of forgot about? That comes back in the end and explains that our adventure is not over, but the teleportation gate where we came out at, was unlike anywhere we've ever seen. And you pop out in this like jungle forest, and there's these giant demon forest monsters, and then it just cuts out. You know, it kind of reminded me of the ending of Half-Life 1. If you tell the G-Man you don't want to help him, he like throws you in like an unwinnable fight. It's like that, but it's going to be winnable because it's obviously the start of Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2.
I do appreciate the like the post credits like codec conversation, like how
like it's very Metal Gear Solid.
Like every Metal Gear Solid at the end is like, yes, everything went according to plan. No one knows anything about my true allegiances.
The difference though is Dark Alliance did not make you watch the whole credits. They did actually like do this right before the credits rolled, and the credits were kind of funny because I let the credits roll because I like to like do that. I'm like, I'm going to give them their credits.
Yeah, they all worked on this game.
They worked hard on this game. I'm going to give them the credit for it. And it was a really quick credit sequence, which was great. And it just ended and took me right back to the main menu. There was no fanfare at the end. It was just like, thank you. Cut.
All right. Nope, so, that's it. That's all we got.
Yeah. And that's the plot. Baldur's Gate, Dark Alliance 1. All
right.
It's just, we'll talk about it more. Let's get to the development. I want to save up my final thoughts for the end. So development's kind of quick on this game. There's not a lot to go off of, but I did find a cool IGN article that kind of talks about this. And it wasn't even an article, it was a press release in 2000. So the CRPG games, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, were really, really big. I don't know. You're probably familiar with those if you're listening to this. If you're not, I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 has been a big game recently. And that really was the sequel, like 20 years later from Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Like these CRPG games are very big, very fun. And Interplay, who was the publisher, along with like Black Isle Studios, they both published, right, or developed. They were like, we're bringing and they told IGN in November of 2000 that they were bringing Baldur's Gate to PS2, but it was not as a CRPG. We're going to do something for console because it's separate. And this is a direct quote from that article, quote, the game is probably not going to be a port, but rather an original game tailored to the PS2. Quote, most likely it'll be original, added the Interplay representative, who also added that Interplay is still in the decision-making process about many aspects of the game. So in 2000, we knew there would be Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, but we didn't know what it was. It was
developed. People were probably getting excited for Baldur's Gate on console, and they were like, hold on. It's not going to be that, but it is going to be cool.
Exactly. That's a big thing about it, is like we knew it was going to be Baldur's Gate, and some people might have thought it was a CRPG. I don't think they did that because we've just kind of seen CRPGs work in modern consoles, and I think it really has to do with how many buttons there are.
Yeah, you need like a mouse for all these older CRPGs, a mouse and like a keyboard with all the buttons because they just have so much going on, and their interfaces are not at all streamlined for a controller.
Yeah, like I mean, let's try. Let's go. Someone open up Steam and try to plug in your Xbox controller and see if you can play the original Baldur's Gate. I don't think it's going to work. And the game is not Steam Deck compatible. I'll tell you that much because I checked. So
Maybe the remastered version? Maybe not.
maybe. The game that we did that becomes Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, the one they're talking about here, obviously, it was developed by Snowblind Studios. And this studio is funny because they had only done 2 Nintendo 64 racing games previously 1998's Top Gear Overdrive and 2000's Top Gear Hyperbike, which I own Overdrive, by the way. And I have played it. And it's funny because in the game, it's like got that Top Gear British sass is how I would describe it. And one of the vehicles you could drive is like a donkey in a cage on 4 wheels. It's just silly. But that was their first 2 games they made. And one big change that we know about the development of this game is the CRPG Baldur's Gates were made on the Infinity engine, but Dark Alliance actually is made on a new engine called the Dark Alliance engine.
Oh.
And this engine is actually reused for other PS2 games because it was kind of optimized for PS2. So Fallout, Brotherhood of Steel, and the Bard's Tale versions on PS2 use the same engine.
Oh, cool.
Pretty cool. Yeah. So that I kind of mentioned this just now is like we just talked about this, but my main question I had really was why they didn't port Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. And I think we've all come to determine it's the controls. The controls just wouldn't work. That's pretty clear.
Yeah, and they're like slower games too. I think that like maybe just doesn't hit as hard with a console audience.
For sure. The game was PS2 first, but eventually came to Xbox and GameCube. And the Game Boy Advance port, I did play a little bit of it. The big difference between the Game Boy Advance port is the story actually is very similar. It seems like it's going on the same storyline, which is cool. No cutscenes, just text, obviously. No voiceover.
Not fully voiced.
Not fully voiced. But the character creator, instead of it being an elven sorcerer, a human or arcane archer, and a dwarven fighter, it's just a standard human character, a male human character, and his outfit changes from like brown to green to pink based on what like class you are, which is very Game Boy Advance.
Yeah.
But I did play it and it was pretty fun. I mean, it looks decent. It kind of looks like the first Diablo.
Okay. It would have been cool to play it as a kid. Like if you were into Dark Alliance, the Game Boy version would have been like the cool portable way to play it.
Oh yeah, I actually thought about buying the game, like trying to find a copy of it because I think it's not expensive either. Like the Game Boy Advance port, it's a cool version. So now the game also I mentioned here, it sold over 1 million copies. Like this game was big, and it was big enough to make a sequel. Like we got a Dark Alliance 2 out of this. So I do think this game remains beloved, especially among like D&D fans, but also console hack and slash gaming fans. Like action RPGs are kind of like a quintessential console genre. And I think Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance nailed it. They Snowblind Studios did end up making 2 more action RPGs on the PS2, Champions of Norath, Realms of EverQuest, and that came out in 2004. And then in 2005, they made Champions Return to Arms, both of which are set in the EverQuest universe, which means we could talk to Matthew again about these probably.
We should.
I wonder if Matthew's played them. Also, Burger Champ, friend of the podcast, Discord user, brought up those on Discord to me. So shout out to the champion of burgers, everybody.
Thanks, Burger Champ.
Give it up for Burger Champ. So, and those games are also interesting enough, by the way. Side tangent. Hit the button again. The EverQuest Champions of Norath and Champions Return to Arms games are actually kind of lost vaporware, abandoned. Not vaporware.
Oh, just abandonware.
Abandonware. Yeah, sorry, not vaporware. That was they're abandonware. There are no PC ports of those games, and you can only play them on the original discs. So if someone's looking to bring it back to life, this would be the time.
They must work on emulators though, right?
Oh yeah, you work on emulators, but I mean, they're still like, I think that's considered abandonware, right? If it's just the original versions of it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I feel like there should be someone. Well, I wonder if this is a good question because I'm trying to get on the podcast the Video Game History Foundation. I think they'd be really cool to talk about on here because I want to know how they classify things. like what constitutes abandonware in their eyes,
Yeah.
and like what constitutes things that need to be saved, because it seems like they're archiving a lot of documents, which is awesome. But what about these games that came out a long time ago that if someone accidentally like throws away their copy of it because they don't care, are just lost to time and have never been archived?
Yeah, I don't
Also,
know.
what about mobile games that have just get taken off of servers by companies and thrown into a dark corner somewhere and never looked at again? Like
Yeah.
that's
There's a real problem there, and when it comes to like for the perspective of like video game preservation, because those games require servers, and there's the question of like, well, what era do you preserve? Because like you could say we should preserve World of Warcraft. Or like, what does that mean? You want the original vanilla World of Warcraft? Do you want the current version of World of Warcraft? Anywhere in between? Because even beyond expansions, there's like patches for every expansion, right? So like what does that mean to preserve a game like that is constantly evolving, and that's something that I guess we're still figuring out.
dude, that's a lot like what we were talking about with Matthew and EverQuest and how they
Mhm.
homebrewed the original servers. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah,
you should let them do that because that's preservation. Like
yeah,
that's preservation, and it's
yeah.
cool.
There's some resolution that was being worked on in Europe, the Stop Killing Games thing. I don't know where that's at currently, but there was like a sort of a push to get Europe to regulate these games where it's like, look, if you're gonna shut your game down, you need to like at least provide a way for people to play it still. So maybe that's providing like the ability for other people to run their own servers. I think people are really upset about games like The Crew,
Oh
Ubisoft,
yeah.
where they're just like, we just shut it down. And so if you bought The Crew, you cannot play it anymore. You just can't. Not there's no offline mode. There's no nothing. You just can't play that game anymore.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. That's we're going to talk about that in a second because that's a great segue. In 2021,
Ooh,
there was a game called Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance that came out. And this was supposed to be like, I got excited, honestly, because this was going to be kind of it's coming back, right? And you could play as Drist in this game. Like you could play as
ooh,
these
like
heroes.
this is a different game.
This is a different game. This is a new game that came out in 2021. And this is very topical now because it did so poorly in 2021 that on February 24th of 2025 this year, it is going offline forever and will become a
Wow.
single player only experience. And
Oh,
I
hey, at
am
least you can still
thinking
play it.
about buying a hard copy
Do
because
it.
I think it's never gonna it's not I mean this it's gonna be gone, right? So I was excited for this game because it came out on Game Pass as well, and I was gonna play it. And they
Really?
just
Wow.
yeah, it was an action RPG. It was
I gotta pull it up.
very buggy on launch. It didn't do well. It was very buggy. It had a lot of broken systems, is how it was described in like the review. I think IGN reviewed it and gave it like a 4 out of 10. And IGN is pretty nice, I feel like, in their reviews a lot. So when they tell a game it's bad, it's like, oof, they're really going for it.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's an IGN article that just came out called Dungeons and Dragons Dark Alliance going offline after 3 years. It was called Dungeons and Dragons Dark Alliance, not Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, but it definitely is inspired
Okay,
by.
like supposed to, they want you to be thinking about these Dark Alliance
Yeah,
games.
and I think you might even be playing as the same like 3 characters. You
Okay.
know, like you might be playing as Cromlech and then Adriana and then Vaughn. I think those and also Drizzt are like the characters you can play. I need to check. I'm not backing that up. Also, I'm still bummed I said vaporware earlier instead of abandonware. You know? But honestly, as far as words go, vaporware is way cooler to
It
say.
is a good word.
Vaporware is a fun word to say. But it is yeah, it's probably gonna be abandonware then. I think you can still play it though. You can still play the new Dark Alliance. You just have to play it in offline single player mode, is
Hmm.
what they said. So now Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2 did come out later after Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 1. This came out and was actually developed though by Black Isle Studios, and they're the ones that actually published the first game. So it was no longer with Snowblind because Snowblind went on to do the EverQuest action RPGs. So we're gonna probably talk about that in the next iteration we do of D&D games. I'm not gonna do that next time because I just ordered a book on Minecraft, baby. We're gonna do Minecraft.
Oh, yeah.
And I was having a good conversation with Burger Champ about how to avoid the topics that are kind of dicey to me. And it's kind of stopped me from doing it in the past, but I think this is going to be a really good way for us to do that. It's also going to be interesting to see, because we're going to talk a little bit probably about how Mojang has changed their history as well.
Ooh.
Because
You mean like rewritten it? Like,
yes, because the book I bought is brand new. It just came out in 2024. There was another history book that came out in 2013. I am going to try to get both so I can find the differences between the two, because I think that would be
okay.
kind of interesting to see. But any hoozle. All right, let's move on to my final thoughts on Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. I'm not sure how to put this best, but this game is flawed in many ways, but I still love it. That's how I would describe it. Like, the plot has so many problems to me and how to tell a good story, but I still like it because I don't think the plot's important. I think the gameplay is important. This really goes off that old John Carmack quote about how, like, the plot is not important to video games. I'm not going to say why. I'm not going to use his exact metaphor.
You don't need to quote him verbatim.
I don't need to quote him verbatim, but if you know the quote I'm talking about. So the gameplay in this game is fun. It's, to me, I think there's some things I really love about it. And that is, they brought you into the D&D universe. Like, for me as a kid playing this game in like my family room in the early 2000s, like, I didn't know what a beholder was until I played this game, but it was really cool, right? It was really cool to experience. And the Dark Alliance as a like plot point is a way to make it so they can bring all these enemy types into the D&D canon. I mean, you're fighting kobolds, you're fighting yetis, you're fighting gnolls, you're fighting lizard people. Like, there's these big like iron golems you're fighting. There's just so much cool stuff going on here. And now I get to talk about my favorite part of the entire video game, which is the Onyx Tower. I didn't talk about this. This is the final area, and it's where I officially fell in love with this game. So this area is meant to be like a mini gauntlet before you unlock the real gauntlet. This is supposed to be a challenge. So the entire game, you could use a recall potion to go back to the original place you were at, right? So you can go back to the social hub at any time, recall. You could like recall almost in the middle of combat. Like, enemies could be chasing you and you could recall, right? And then you could go buy potions or whatever. You cannot recall once you go into the Onyx Tower. So I was actually kind of nervous. There was a moment where I was like, I might not be able to beat this game before we do the podcast episode, because I've been recalling and spamming the triggers constantly. I was wrong. The Onyx Tower just overloads you with potions and magic items. It honestly feels like the developers are like, hey, you know how to play Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. Now here, have fun. That's kind of how they treat the final area. Magic items drop constantly. Potions and arrows drop constantly. This is where I got my big weapon. I got my adamantine halberd of fire +5. Like, that's what I got here. And like that, it did like 144 damage maxed out when it critted.
Nice.
It just felt kind of refreshing because it was an area that I thought I was going to be like scared to go into, and it turned out to be really easy because at this point I had learned the game and I had learned how to do things, and they were rewarding me by being like, yeah, you can't recall, but you don't even need to. You also, the economy of like Skyrim, of going into like a cave or a dungeon and like making sure you pick up all the items so you can sell it. Who cares? You can't recall, so you can't sell anything. So just ignore it. Just keep going. Like, that was kind of refreshing too. It took it and made it just like a fun, like, big finale to me. And which is funny because I love the Onyx Tower more than I love the final boss fight in the Onyx Tower. The boss fight is kind of meh, but there's actually a boss that you fight, like a sub boss, where it's a giant onyx golem, and you kill him and he drops an onyx sword, which is like one of the best weapons in the game. It's not the best weapon, but it's one of the best. So the game even goes, hey, if you haven't gotten something good yet randomly,
here's something good.
We're giving you something good. So at least you can fight the final boss, which is cool. But yeah, I love the Onyx Tower. I love, and I think that's what made me love this game even more. I'm kind of curious what the second game's going to be like. I really don't know if it's going to have that same kind of feeling. I hope so. The interesting thing that I didn't really get too much into it, now that I'm looking back on it and I've read this whole thing, is they did kind of loosely use the rules of Dungeons and Dragons in this. And I think there was 3 or 3.5 they were using,
Mhm.
was like the rule set they were using. And one thing I didn't mention about what makes this game so hard is as a character, you're critting, right? Like you can crit and do extra damage. But I think the enemies can crit you too,
Ooh.
which is where a lot of those instant deaths come from. Because I was fighting some of these onyx golems in the tower, and they would do a trident move on me where they like poke you with a trident, and sometimes it would do like a little bit of my health bar, and I'm like, that's not a big deal. And then they do it again, and my whole health bar would be gone. and I'm
Dang.
like, I think they're critting. I think that's what happens. Is like, and I kind of like that it's showing you that like D&D fare, where it's like, yeah, it's hard, but it's a
Mhm.
challenge. And so when I beat the Onyx Tower, I did feel like really proud of myself, and that made me feel good. And
Good.
so I think that's what made this game fun to me. And the stories, it's there, but the experience of it all makes you feel, it gives you the power fantasy. It's like Destiny. It's like when Destiny's good. It's like it
Mhm.
makes you feel like that. It's like, oh, when this game is good, it makes you feel like a hero in D&D, and that's what's really cool about it. So that's it. That's my thought on it. It's a flawed game, but I love it. I don't even think I have nostalgia goggles on here. I think I just like it. So
Well, I played it for a little bit and I was like, this is kind of neat. And I didn't play enough to like get into it, but maybe I should because I have no nostalgia for it, but I could see how it was fun.
I mean, you even said to me that you said something off air. I'm gonna quote you off air. Are you ready? Where you
Mhm.
said that you could see childhood you getting really into this game, and I think
Yeah,
that's what it is. Like
I would have definitely.
as a kid growing up in Auburn, Washington in 2002, trying to be a jock and bad at it, I found a game that was like fantasy that I could have kind of as my own because I didn't know anyone else playing this game as a kid, right? Like I had no idea. So like this was kind of like a secret nerdy treat for me. And I think now as an adult playing it back, I'm like, oh yeah, this is good. This is a good introduction into the Dungeons and Dragons universe, and it's a good way for if you know someone that's like I don't know about D&D, be like, hey, just check out this game. The plot's fine, but just check it out. Just
Like,
play
just
it.
is the world interesting to you?
The world, yeah, is the world is because that's what this is, and the world is interesting, and it's done in these like narrative dumps by these characters, but that's fine because like it's like when you have someone who's a DM in a D&D game. It kind of reminded me when they're like, oh, I got to explain the plot to everyone real quick, and it's just like this long soliloquy like what's
Mhm.
happening, and that's kind of what they did, but they really told, not showed, is what happened. um, but yeah, it's a fun game. So I'm curious to do more D&D games. It's making me wonder though, when we do original CRPG Baldur's Gates, like that might be one game as like a multi-parter.
Yeah.
That might be like one game, one episode we talk about the plot. You know what I mean?
Dang.
Like one
Yeah.
episode because they're long. They're not short games at all. I started Baldur's Gate 1 and I'm like barely scratching the surface, and it
Mhm.
feels pretty crazy. So yeah, but this is a long episode, but I told Tyler it would be because I love it. So Tyler, what you been playing?
This week, just God of War 2. I'm close to the end. I am 7 save points away from the end. There are 48 save points in this game, so I'm 7 from the end. That's how I've divided them up. They're roughly the same distance between them, but not totally. But I think I got like an hour or two left, basically. And I'm today is Sunday, the Super Bowl day. So while I am watching the Super Bowl, I might be also playing a little bit of God of War, trying to finish that up today.
That's awesome. I charged my Steam Deck to play a little Stardew during the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's a good move.
Yeah,
But
so
that's it. That's all I've been playing. Really. What have you been playing?
I forgot to mention this last week, but a friend of mine and my brother have been playing the Ghost Recon Wildlands,
Hmm.
which is that open world Ghost Recon that came out in like 2017, I
Mm-hmm.
believe. And it's on Game Pass. And my brother is like, I've been playing this. You should try it out with me. And I got my friend into it too. And so we're all playing together. And it's a weird mix. It's like sometimes you're playing Ghost Recon, and sometimes you're playing Grand Theft Auto, and then sometimes you're playing Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's like all bleeding into one, but it's really fun, and it's a good time, and it's hilarious because you're supposed to be like this ghost team, right? Like you're sneaking in, like you're
Mm-hmm.
killing guys, but you're sneaky about it. But what ends up happening with us is we're sneaking in. Someone messes up. Now it's a full on like Call of Duty game. Like that's what's been happening. And I really like it. So I've been playing that, and it's been really fun. And we're getting close to the end of that too. And then I've been playing Stardew a little bit because I've had this realization that I've never really gotten 100% completion, and I kind of want to do it just one time. I want to get 100% completion, but it's going to be a grind. So I'm definitely playing it kind of passively. When I think about it, I'm like, I got like an hour to kill. I'll just put a couple days into Stardew Valley. So in-game days, obviously. And then, yeah, but I mean, I haven't booted up Dark Alliance 2 yet. I might jump into my Minecraft server and just kind of vibe out there for a bit while I figure out what to talk about there, and do that. I've been thinking about starting my own home server, though. I got to talk to you.
Ooh, I would love to talk to you about that.
Because my thought was, and I'm going to say it here out loud and clear right now, if I start my own home server and I get the security policies up to date, maybe we could finally do a Codex Minecraft server with all our peeps, which I think would be kind of fun to do. So I got to figure out how to do that and not have people hack into my mainframe, as they say.
You don't want to have your mainframe hacked into.
No one hack into the mainframe, everybody. But all right, you can also, if you want to support us, you can go to codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. That's our email address you can send to us. You can go to codexpodcast.net. I don't know what we're doing next week, but it's going to be fun regardless. We're going to have a good time. And this was a really long episode today. Tyler, would you like to say goodbye to everybody? But say it in your best like dungeon master voice. Like do a dungeon master, like a narrator of a fantasy game. I want you to do it that way.
And with that, after the evil had been vanquished and sealed away for an indeterminate amount of time, the heroes went home and thus ended their quest.
That was so good.